Why do you emphasize writing down the questions as opposed to just doing them in your head?
Well, you mean on the concepts that we're working with?
Right.
I ask people to write, to identify their stressful thoughts and put it on paper. And that way the mind is stopped. The stressful concepts you're believing are stopped. They're there. And your mind can go on and say, I really didn't mean that. I meant something else. Doesn't matter what it did, what it thinks. There it is. So undeniably, who thought it, who wrote it, well, that was you. That's it. You know it. And no matter what your mind does with it, there it is. Right. It can deny it, but there it is. So then it's stopped. People have wanted to stop their mind for centuries and centuries and centuries, and they never knew how. So there it is, stopped. Mind on paper, stopped. Bring it out of mind into the physical world that mind imagines that it exists, put it on paper, and then question it using the 4 questions and turn around. And no matter what happens with other concepts, just notice, write them somewhere else, and come back to that one. Do all 4 questions and turn around. And no turnarounds without the questions first, because the questions, the turnarounds become habitual and ineffective without the 4 questions.
Right.
Not that that's not helpful, but eventually the work doesn't work. Why? Because you're not answering the questions. You're taking a shortcut, which again, it's okay. It's just that if it stops working for you, it's because you have stopped working it.
Right.
So on the 4 questions and the turnaround, and you find 3 examples for the turnaround, so that the mind has an opportunity to see how the opposites, or if the opposites, are as true or truer. And they always are. They always are to the open mind, and open mind, open heart. Closed mind, closed hearts. People who harm themselves and other human beings have closed minds. It's not their fault. They're simply believing their thoughts. When I go into penitentiaries, hardcore prisons, work with lifers, it's simple to see why they're in there when I understand what they were believing when it happened. And I was sharing with an interviewer from Israel Today earlier this morning that an American in an Israeli prison for murdering his girlfriend, sentenced for life. And he sent me a thank you note. There are some people there that take the work into prisons all over the place. Muslims, Jews, they're just doing it in Israel. It's wonderful to see what they're doing with the work there. But he was thanking me for the peace that he has found. He murdered his girlfriend because she didn't think he was enough. She didn't think he was worthy, on and on and on. And he murdered her. And he became so angry. So he was doing the work in prison with my friend Arik, and he found that his girlfriend, he had no proof she ever believed that. She never said that to him. She never gave him cause that she believed it. He was simply believing it about himself and projecting it onto her. So when we believe just a simple thought like, she doesn't think I'm worthy, or she doesn't think I'm enough, a simple thought like that, when you believe it and the mind gives you all the proof, it's not a little thing. When a person writes down, they identify and write their thoughts on paper, especially people who are depressed or angry. If they would just question their thoughts, oh my goodness, their identities would shift so quickly that they wouldn't have to do prison. They don't have to do that kind of time. And those of us that are not in prison, are we locked in to the prison of our minds? And people don't like to be locked up in prison because what they're locked up with is their thoughts. And other than that, prison's great. If you
I was just going to say.
Yeah, you put a Buddhist monk in there and lock him in, and he says, thank you.
Right.
And I walk through prisons. There's in San Quentin. There's one of the old places they call Broadway, because it's so full that sometimes they have to just pack them in. I mean, they don't even have cells, and they're just all over the floor on mattresses. It's really quite something. And so I'm in there, and I hear, they lock someone up. You hear the door slam, and you look up, and it's just layers of, just tiers of rows of cells. And you hear one shut. I heard one shut way up above to the right, and he started screaming. And then another one goes off, and another one goes off. And what's happening is they're believing their thoughts. That is the only reason a person would even scream. I mean, again, look what they're locked up with. And there's nothing available to them to shift the mind, like with a cigarette or shopping, credit cards, sex. There's nothing. They're just stuck with this and nothing to do with it.
No credit cards.
And there they are. The thought, I need to get out of here. That is torture when you can't get out and you believe it. I can't live in here. This will kill me. That is torture when there's no way out and you believe it. You believe what you're thinking. So now, with the work in prisons, these prisoners are becoming freer than people on the outside of prison. And I love that, because it's true rehabilitation when we don't believe our stressful thoughts, the thoughts that would harm ourselves or another human being. Those are the stressful ones, and or the thoughts that project others, our own suffering because he, she, etc. When these prisoners, the ones that will get out eventually, and some of them do get out, whether they're rehabilitated or not. They just convince people, that the parole board, that they're okay, and they believe it themselves, and they're very convincing. But the thoughts that put them in there in the first place, they're still running. They still believe them, and they find 12 steps there. They find religion there. They find God there. They find all kinds of wonderful things. And they feel so elevated, and they feel so rehabilitated, and so fine, and their whole body shift. They look so different because they have God, we'll say. Okay, so they're let out of prison, and if their mind doesn't focus on that, then what happens is what they believed that put them in there in the first place, it overrides everything.
Right.
I'm not enough. No one cares. I need a partner. No one understands me. I want, I should, they shouldn't. And they end up behind bars again, and someone gets hurt. They get hurt, and someone gets hurt. So until people know how to question their minds, we can see through history that nothing is changing. And then when we look at the people that are not in prison, we're only out of prison because we didn't get caught. But we're all running this stuff and passing it on to our children and each other. But we're justified. And everyone behind bars is justified, because that's how the mind works. Whatever we do, the mind will defend it and justify it. And that's where the war begins. Defense is the first act of war. So if someone says, Katie, you did it, my first thought is they're right. Now let me check it out, rather than they're wrong. Let me check it out. Because, why would someone lie? They wouldn't lie about it. And if I can't see where I did it, then I'm perfectly open to understanding why they believe that I did it. Look at what they're thinking. So no one's wrong when they say, Katie, you did it. So there's no war in my life. There cannot be, as far as I know.
I mean, I can get that I'm like the prisoner you know?
Well, yeah. You know,
I mean, I can get that.
Anyone that gets bored is in big trouble, you know?
Anyone who gets
bored is in big trouble. And by that, I mean, they don't know how to deal with their thoughts. They don't know how to deal with what they're thinking. So they have to do something to shift the mind.
Right.
Because they don't like what they're thinking. They're not bored. They're not liking what they think. So not knowing how to deal with that, or even recognizing that it's their thinking, they think it's life, and it's not. It's their thoughts about life. That's how lost we are as a human race, as a mind. They have to shift that. They have to shift it, and we do it in the most amazing ways. We call people we don't like. We marry people we don't like simply because we don't want to be alone, simply because we fear. It's a very, and then wonder why we're bitter, and then we blame each other. It's quite a circle.
Wow.
And not everyone, but the people who don't live in ways that I've just described live in other ways. Anyone that is bored, confused, angry, sad, it's just absolutely unnecessary if their mind is open to the work. And it is necessary until the mind is open to that.